So here we go. It's going to start streaming in a moment. Hello, this is Sergio Marrero, and we're here at Rebel One Live with Jacqueline Amable, and she is Managing Director of the NextCorps Climate Tech Program. And thank you for joining us today. Before we jump in, I want to share a little bit about Jackie's background. Really impressive. So she graduated from the University of Florida. She was a Teach for America core fellow, also was CEO and co-founder of Revolar, and she raised over $5 million for that startup, ended up working at Techstars, and is now managing director at NextCorp. So excited to hear about your journey today and your vision for climate change. So thanks again, Jackie.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, so let's jump right in. Can you share with the audience what a little bit about NextCorps and the Climate Tech Program?
Absolutely. So NextCorps is actually a nonprofit that is headquartered out of Rochester, although I'm based in Manhattan. And they help a variety of different entrepreneurs, but have actually been in the clean tech and climate tech space now for over a decade, supporting these types of founders. So I've been saying they've been doing the hard work for a long time. Really excited to join. This program had existed in a different format before it was brought back by our funders at NYSERDA. So, you know, what I always say is that New York is really working on positioning themselves to be leaders in climate tech adoption and environmental justice. And what I love about New York is that they're actually funding the programs to make this thing a reality and passing the policies, which for the climate tech space is so important. So last year they passed the community protection and climate. Now I'm blanking on the name, but they passed this incredible law that helped spur a lot of the climate tech programs here in New York. And it's just really exciting to see them be so forward thinking. And we are also co-facilitating this program with Second Muse that's based out of Brooklyn. And they have several different programs in this space. They have one about ocean plastics in Singapore and the circular economy. So it's really great to have them as partners and thought leaders in the climate tech space. We won't be launching recruiting until January, but excited to be here, and we'll be helping take the program global for the first time.
That is exciting. So I wanted to have Jackie on the program. So she is an investor and focusing from on a very important problem, and then also from usually a different source of funding than traditional venture capital. So talking about putting grants in the space and what have you. Can you share a little bit about what type of founders are you looking for, and how much do you guys invest?
Absolutely. So we have two different programs. So my program is the absolute earliest stage in climate tech that you can get. It's actually probably like with that squishy phase before you're ready for like a Techstars or Y Combinator kind of stage. Our founders tend to be deep technologists, academics, researchers. We do a lot of recruiting from labs and academia, and also from the community. But these technologies have to be able to relate to reducing global greenhouse emissions, right? So we're looking for technology to make buildings and transportation more efficient, renewables, smart grids. There's a lot of manufacturing, a lot of hardware in this space. And the founders are usually these brilliant PhDs who are completely new to the business world, right? So they've spent their career studying this very specialized space and now have cracked something critically important for us to evolve our systems and learn how to use power and energy differently. But they're new to tech, which is how I ended up starting to work with a lot of these founders because of my hardware experience. Hardware is hardware to a certain degree. And I love the complexity of it. I know it's not for every type of investor out there, but what I find is that if we're able to help pair them with the right teams and the right team members early on, you can see a lot of amazing traction with them and in this space. And how we invest is really differently. So I say that we competitively de-risk climate tech in order to commercialize it quickly. So as we're pulling this technology basically directly out of labs, it's a virtual global program, and we give them we accept probably about 20 teams, and we'll be able to, invest up to $5,000 in that first round. After that, we reduce that number by half. So we'll see some teams merge. We'll see some people say, hey, you know what, being a founder isn't for me, but let's figure out a way to license it, or at least, or we see some really early exits, which we've also seen in this space. And then the next 10 get another tranche of non-dilutive funding. And then they basically compete to be the top 3 to 5, in which we're able to pour quite a bit of non-dilutive funding, depending on their matching grants or matching funding that they're also able to access. So what I really like about this model is that when I was a hardware founder, it's so hard to do that early R&D, and you end up losing a lot of equity along the way. And so with this model, where we're de-risking the technology and making it easier for investors, maybe who want to work in the climate space but are hesitant because of the manufacturing costs. And our other program, the scale version of my program, helps people go from prototype to production and helps fund that through the state. So we don't take equity because it's state dollars, but we still very much are investing in the success of these companies. But I think that that's the perfect trifecta needed, since so many investors, I keep hearing they're like, oh, they're anxious about this space. And I was like, well, it has to happen, right? So why not start investing in the winners that are going to be in this space? We know we need to evolve this way, and now the policies are starting to catch up.
That's great. And, especially the need to accelerate not only climate founders, but also building systems to help hardware founders, which is a different, challenge altogether. As you said, they usually need an extra round of early stage funding, which, compresses the returns for those earliest investors and the founders. So tough area to work in, but I know Jackie's up to the challenge. I want to go back to your hardware experience and being CEO of Revolar. Can you share with the audience what was Revolar?
Absolutely. Revolar, meant to take flight again, and was an ode to survivors of sexual violence like my sister. Essentially, I realized that after my sister's second attack, that a smartphone wasn't enough, and pepper spray, you couldn't bring it with you everywhere. Um, I just remember thinking, like, there must be something that my sister could have worn, a necklace or something hidden, that if she was in real danger, she could have pressed it and let me know right away. And at that point, I became obsessed with figuring out, like, how do I make this happen? How do I get my sister this technology? And I remember thinking, like, how hard can it be? Because I was coming out of college, right? I was like, how hard can this be? Like, we got to the moon, we built rocket ships. Like, it's a button. Like, why has nobody built this? And I found out that it's not necessarily the button that is hard to build. It is 100% the business around it. And I think that's what our climate tech founders find, right? Like, it's one thing to build the tech, but in some ways the tech can be fairly straightforward once you've cracked a certain code. But with the business, right? Like, there's so many variables, timing, you have to find the right partners. You have to get the right messaging. You have to make sure the right people are hearing it. There's just a lot of different challenges. And so when building Revolar, that's what we discovered. And so we went through Techstars twice with our team. I was really lucky that my co-founder is just, was such a great partner to have, and she's still at Techstars. Unfortunately, we had to sell it in 2017 after I brought in a new CEO. Definitely not what I thought we were going to be doing when I brought in a new CEO, but it happens, and I learned a ton of hard lessons that way. So we sold it. I worked for the new owners for a little bit, and then realized that it was time for me to go. And so Techstars had offered me the role as regional director of the Americas, and took it from there. But yeah, my manufacturing experience is like, I felt like I kind of had like the dream first experience. I had an amazing CTO with more experience than I could have ever asked for in this space. And we got to build beautiful products that we were really proud of during my tenure there.
And I know some of our audience members are aspiring founders, and they may, like, I know some seasoned investors will pick or founders will pick up, some of the challenges of building. Can you share a little bit about, like, what were some of those challenges, or how did you come to like hiring a new CEO? Can you just unpack some of that
Sure.
for the audience?
So I think each stage had really unique challenges for me as a first time founder. Like if I think early on, right? Like a lot of people are investing in team, which I was pretty great, I think, at recruiting amazing people. Like I take a lot of pride in trying to work with people that are a lot smarter than myself. Like I think not a lot of people are comfortable with that. And it's actually something my investors consistently pointed out was one of my strengths, is that I like to surround myself with people that are going to challenge me and be like, well, actually, Jackie, I'm not sure this is a good idea, and here's why, right? And so, but in those early days, before I raised my first 3 million, I mean, my co-founder and I, we chose to move in together. I was bootstrapping on a teacher salary for the first 2 years. I was doing Teach for America, which is probably to this day the hardest job I've ever had. I mean, I'm sorry, like nothing beats chasing 32 6-year-old boys around. Like I was exhausted every day and like entirely it's almost actually the same reaction, because every day you wake up and then you go to work and you're like, please don't die on me, you know, like, and you think that about your business too. So it's this, I guess, equal adrenaline in some senses, but like, you know, tiny lives, they matter more. So like, it just felt a lot of, you know, but it was such an incredible experience. And I think that it was the right job to start with, because being a CEO of a startup is a lot of emotional intelligence. It's a lot of working with different personalities and helping them make a team out of those different personalities and letting them be themselves and like shine in different ways while still creating the right culture and the right mix. Again, our mission called to really great people. So I felt very lucky that when we had a mission like we did. But I think, you know, my earliest mistake was probably I let everybody pick their own titles. It's funny that you call this like Rebel One, because I always say I'm the politest rebel you'll ever meet. Like I was taught to have manners, but like and so when I first started the company, I was like, screw hierarchy. Like I don't want to be put in a box. I don't want to be labeled. So I'm going to let everybody else pick their titles. Horrible idea. Like the worst, like that's something, of course, like some 20-year-old CEO does that, right? Like I'm like, what was I thinking? Like now I love org structure and I deeply understand the importance of creating proper structures and systems to help your team thrive the same way I would have done in a classroom. But I was like, oh, you don't need to apply that to adults. Yes, you do. Like you absolutely need to apply that to adults. They, you know, and it's for the health of your team. And so luckily my co-founder and my then CFO came to me after I raised my 3 million and they're like, hey, Jackie, like we're so proud of you for closing 3 million, but you need to fix everybody's titles. Like these are woefully off, and we'll change our titles first and recommend to others and help them understand why this is important. And I think to this day, the amount of empathy that my team showed me, because, you know, I think they were all having fun with it at first, and then they realized, okay, we have to allow for growth in this business, which means not everybody can just pick wonky titles. We need an org structure. And that probably happened when we hit like 8 employees. Like I remember like my first gray hair from running a business popped out when one of my early team members goes, that was a really interesting meeting, Jackie, but I had a lot of work to do for you. And like, that didn't pertain to me at all. And I was like, oh, because the team was officially big enough that we weren't all going to be in one meeting. So that was like a naivete one. But the other one is, I think we went after the wrong channel strategy. Right? Like this is 2016, and we thought that the right move was to launch in retail.
Okay.
And we should have launched it on Amazon or our own channel. A lot of people ask me like, oh, I want to enter retail. How did you enter retail? And I'm like, unless you've made 10 million in sales on your own site, you probably don't have no business launching retail, because retail is a hard point of sale. Unless you have a mass following or really easily understood product, which we didn't have either, right, at that point. But this is the year that like Amazon eclipsed every other retailer, like 20x. And that was a gap in my understanding of the industry and the trends, right? Like I had this attachment to retail because I love retail. I love stores. I love going to stores. But, and even though that strategy had worked for people like Fitbit and others, that wasn't going to work for us. And so I look back and I'm like, wow, like now I fully understand the power of some channels. And when people talk to me about channel strategy, I have strong opinions because I know which ones, you know, led to sales and which ones didn't. Like, I think people consistently undervalue QVC. My goodness, these people move products? What else did I mess up along the way?
Well, I'm sure you did a lot.
Like so many.
Raising over $5 million isn't a small feat. Can you talk about like what were some of the challenges? How did you even do that? Right? Many
Yeah.
people, but very few, especially women and Latinx folks, less than 2% have accomplished that. So can you share a little bit about how you achieved that?
Yeah. So I was living in Denver at the time, and I heard of something called a startup week. And the story is important to lead to this because I think a lot of it is the confidence that you walk in with, the opportunity that you're offering, but also understanding. My dad used to say you have to know the rules of the game and play them better than anybody else. I may not have known all the VC rules, but like I was educating myself enough to understand that I had to present confidently and with an opportunity. Like I'm not asking for money, I'm offering you an opportunity. Right. And that mindset is a really hard shift for somebody that's never fundraised before. But I remember again, I was young and slightly naive and I was like, who wouldn't want a slice of this? Right. Like I'm onto something big. Y'all are crazy. This is a very big problem. This is before Me Too. Right. So like people's heads had not yet grasped what a large problem this was. And it was just so obvious to me and my friends. But we, right, again, I could just talk, we had the wrong beachhead market, but I went to the startup week and there was a session for women who start up. And I thought if anybody's going to care about what I'm building, it's going to be this panel. And so I made sure to get there early. I sat at the very front. It was a 300-person event. And that dreaded moment came when they said no more questions. And I had read research when I was a school teacher with Teach for America that shows that when you say no more questions, little boys are more likely to shout out or keep their hand up, and they get positive reinforcement for doing so. You tend to be like, okay, I'll answer your one last question. You're so excited. But with little girls, if they try to do that, you correct them. And so I thought about that psychology. And in that moment, I kept my hand up. And I kept my hand up for so long that people had started to exit. And Drea, my co-founder, is next to me laughing her butt off. She thinks it's hysterical that I won't put my hand down. But it worked. The panelists saw me and they start laughing and they're like, let her ask her question. And so I stood up and I said, look, I know business is who you know. And I'm a school teacher that's trying to end, rape culture, leveraging technology and community. And I don't know anybody. Like, where do you start when you literally don't know anybody in this space? They all offered to help. Only one actually followed up. Her name is Jane Miller. She wrote the book, Sleeping Your Way to the Top and Other Myths About Being a Woman in Business. And she was phenomenal. That book is phenomenal. It gave me great advice. When somebody tells you something you don't know, don't lie. Say, can you share me some resources? I want to make sure we're aligned on your request and I'll follow up. Right? Don't lie. If you don't know what they're saying, don't act like you do. Ask for help in a professional way. And so she then introduced me to Seth Levine from the Foundry Group. And the first time Seth met me, he was like, they're like, okay, I'm introducing you to my friend who's a VC. And I was like, man, like, when do I get to talk to an investor? I kid you not, I thought that because I did not know. Again, it's a vocabulary. This world it's a lingo, but it's all it is. And so if you speak multiple languages, it's code switching in the same way you would code switch at home, right? And so I just had to learn to code switch. But at that point, I didn't know a VC was an investor. And so Seth graciously took my call. I pitched him. He's like, all right, you're like a little early, but go hit some more milestones, come back and we'll talk. And so I hit a couple more milestones and I followed up. And I said, hey, Seth, like it's been 3 months. Here's the progress you've made. And he goes, okay, what are your terms? And that's when I said, hey, I'm really excited to hear you ask that, but I want to make sure we're aligned on the request. Can you send me some resources and I'll send you some terms?
That's awesome.
So Seth sent me Brad Feld's blogs on convertible notes. I had won free legal at that startup week because I won the pitch competition. So I had pro bono legal. They sent me a blank convertible document and I read his blogs for 3 days and I looked at this legal paper and I looked at this. And then I was like, okay, Brad says on average, and this is before I knew Brad Feld. Now we're friends, but I didn't know Brad at this point, right? So I just knew this blog and I'm like, okay, he said on average, it's a 4 million cap with a 20% discount and da-da-da-da-da. And so I put a 4 million cap with a 20% discount and asked for 200,000. Seth comes back and he's like, you need to ask for more money. And I was like, okay,
That's
really?
Awesome.
And that's how we got into their AngelList syndicate. And then we got into Techstars through a pitch competition, and we met them there. I got that funding. And then after the program, I asked for 2 million, and Foundry Group was basically like, you're going to screw it up and need an extra million, so we'll give you 3, which they were so right, because we did need that extra million. And that's what makes them such phenomenal investors, right? They always said, like, you were the right one to build this. We're going to make sure you have the right resources to do this justice, or at least have a real shot at doing it justice. They never asked inappropriate questions. It was always just professional, right? It was just like this great conversation with somebody that you enjoyed talking to about your business. So I really strive to be that way for my founders. Like, I really want them to feel the way that I felt when I got to work with Foundry, which was just really respected and seen as a peer. Even though I, had a lot to learn. Even when things didn't go the way I wanted, right? Like, Brad calls me at the end and he's like, congratulations. I was like, for what? Like, that did not go the way I wanted it to go. And he was like, you got so much further than anybody, like, I promise you, imagined. And we're just so, we'd be, stay in touch, essentially. And so it was just, they're just such great humans, and really great investors keep founders in the game, right? Like, I think after that, I was like, do I stay in tech? Do I not? What does a former CEO do once they sell their business? I felt very unemployable. But luckily, between the Techstars and Foundry Group community, they were like, no, there's like totally places for you in this ecosystem. You just have to rekindle your, take a break. It's been 6 years, you've been running at full steam, and then you'll figure it out.
That's great. That's great, and it's great to have the right support system around you as you're leading. But I love your the candor and the humility, right? In saying, okay, there are things I don't know, but you said, hey, can I have some resources and follow up? And then the great investors said, hey, it's a hardware product. You need more than that, right? And knew you needed that boost. I know you talked about a little bit about the changing of like CEO and then ultimately like leaving. Is there anything about that you would like to share?
Sure. I mean, I was really having a hard time with that last raise. I had learned some hard lessons around, how to get the right people to the table. Looking back, and I mean, I joke, this is what makes me such a great coach, is that I did screw up so much, right? Like, as a first-time founder, I don't think I ran the tightest investor pipeline that I could have. I think I could have done a lot better at managing the times and the conversations, and expressing, the data and the importance and the value of what we were doing. Who actually really helped me with that is my friend Ann Lai. Unfortunately, I met her too late. She just got me to general partner at Bullpen Capital. I'm so happy for her. She's going to be amazing for founders. But it was really her who helped me shape that narrative. And so by that point, I was just feeling frustrated, right? Like, I had been fundraising. I had, Foundry and a bunch of other great people in the round, but I couldn't close it. And I started to get really burnt out. And at the same time, I had made the personal realization that I wanted to be in the sustainability space. At that point, I'd been attending a lot of future city conferences, a lot of doing research on how do you really end violence. And that's solving in many ways for the climate crisis and resource allocation market failures, that all had started to become really interconnected with the past social justice work I had done. And so I was like, okay, like, I've been at this for 6 years. I'm exhausted. I'm struggling with this next round, even though I felt like I had some pretty strong metrics. And I realized I needed help. We went through an almost acquisition that didn't pan out. And I was like, okay, there must be something I'm not seeing, something I'm missing. And I need somebody to guide this. So I brought in a new CEO, and he was great. And I learned a lot in 3 months from him. I will say that. But it just, I think it wasn't the right fit at the right time. And what my investors ended up saying to me was that they thought I was too early. Again, this is before Me Too. We sold like a few months before the Me Too movement, which was really kind of made me sad. Like, I would have loved to have seen what our company could have done for that community during that time. Like, I wish we'd had the chance to stay alive just like 6 months longer. But it was time to sell. And so when we had the opportunity to do so, we decided to make that move. And it was not an easy decision to make by any means. But it was what we thought was right at that moment based on, the state of the team and where we were at. But it was hard, right? Like my dream and my personal identity was completely wrapped up in that business. And I really did and still do see the potential for that being $1 billion business. And I hope somebody wins in that space.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, because I think a lot of especially investors, right, that haven't had experience on the founder side, they don't understand the how tough being a founder is, and how embedded even your personal identity comes with the startup. The same thing is, like, I remember launching my startup, ending up closing it because, like, we had a team in Puerto Rico, and then Hurricane Maria hit, and we just didn't have enough cash to bring everyone stateside and keep running to the next milestone. And it's, it's hard to separate the venture from yourself in that journey, but it takes a certain type of person. So, kudos to you. But I want to hit on, you mentioned your dedication to the sustainability space and the climate space, and now you're at NextCorps. Can you share a little bit more? How did you think you would be here? Starting is this what you targeted, or I know you said you showed a little bit of that, of you weren't sure where to go. You said, okay, I'm going to go to Techstars. And then you were there for just about, a little under 2 years. And then, now, dedicated climate the entire time and building that. Can you talk a little bit about your journey and where you landed now?
Absolutely. So I believe I mentioned, right, when I was doing Revelar, I ran across some really compelling research for me around how, if you really wanted to end violence and support the most vulnerable communities, which are, my communities, our communities, the communities I grew up around, and where my friends live, you have to solve for these market failures, ones that we're seeing play out in our very everyday lives right now. And I had started to really attend some of these conferences and started to understand the complexity around, like, how do we build the modern life in a new way? And I remember saying to Andrea, like, I think it was like maybe 2015, I was like, I'm going to rebuild cities from the ground up one day. I was like, that's what I think I was put here to do, is like make people's day-to-day lives better, because the structures around them are smarter and faster and more efficient and more clean, and the air will be cleaner and the food will be cleaner. And maybe that's my hippie side. But I knew I wanted to start to head into that space. And even there's an interview in Forbes when I hired my new CEO. And at the very end of that, what was a very intense interview, she's like, if you weren't doing this, what would you be doing? I said, I'd be in sustainability. Like, I knew even when I hired him, that's where I wanted to end up. And when I joined Techstars, my former managing director and investor, Zach Neese, became the MD of the sustainability program. And so I reached out to him and said, hey, look, like, do you think I could be helpful to your founders? And it turns out I could be incredibly helpful to that kind of founder, right? Like, there are some founders who are very savvy at biz dev and org structure, and they know how to create a hiring strategy to match their fundraising strategy. And, they understand, but there's then these brilliant scientists who are taking a total leap of faith and going completely outside of their comfort zones, and trying to bring this technology that they know matters to market. And so when I went and mentored that program versus other programs I mentor in, like, there was this huge outpouring of founders that felt like, you, as somebody who had been recently a first-time founder, understands me. Because I understood the first time that somebody, starts talking to you about, HR strategy and the fundraising strategy, and like, what does that mean, and who should you talk to, and what should be your narrative? How do you create lines for investors and not, dots? How do you construct that narrative from the ground up and communicate to people in a way that gets them excited? And I had such an amazing time working with those founders, because I think at first when I wanted to go into the climate tech space, I had a bit of imposter syndrome. And actually, since I've started my job, I've had like 15 amazing people reach out to me and be like, oh man, I'm dying to go to the climate tech space, but I'm not a climate scientist. I'm like, neither am I. I was like, but I promise you, they need our skill set.
Yep, absolutely.
They need our help. And so once I realized that like it both aligned with what I wanted to do and I could be helpful, I was like, that's awesome. So I get to talk, manufacturing and climate all day, and I'm in my happy place.
That's amazing, and I bet a lot of potential. With there's so much potential there. Can you share a little bit with the audience on, I know you'll have more information that you'll divulge as you keep going, but can you share a little bit more of what do you think the biggest areas of opportunity for investors are in the climate tech space?
Hmm. If when I look at what some of these companies are doing, right? Like even, Shell, Toyota, um, companies that, years ago you never would have thought would be in the green space in any way, shape, are now actively investing and putting their foot in, because it's everything we do, right? It's the buildings. Like imagine New York City, right where I live. It's all those buildings being transformed. It's all the AC units being transformed. It's the transportation, electric vehicles. We're seeing enzymes that can actually recycle plastic, unlike the greenwashing recycling we've been doing for the most part. And it's almost hard to say because there's so many aspects to it. I heard somebody kind of joke recently, you can't electrify everything. So like, there's going to be a lot of questions around like, where do you do, we have a green hydrogen plant coming to New York State, which is also really exciting. So it's hard to put my finger on it, but I think I'm going to be really interested, saying that we're representing in so many ways the vision of New York State is what we can do around buildings, which are just the greatest emitters in this state, right? Like they lighting them, heating them, cooling them. It's things that you take for granted absolutely every single day. I've never thought about AC units this much in my life. But it's kind of cool because investing in the space turns things that you thought were once ordinary magical, because you don't walk through a city looking at it the same. So I think that there's going to be a lot around the urban life that I think is going to be really intriguing. I also think there's, and I think maybe that's the space that we will be investing in most. So I could see like why my bias is there. I'm also deeply passionate, but probably our program won't touch on it, on sustainable fashion. I think that whoever can really, there's some really cool startups coming out in that space. I just spent all day today with the Farm to Fork Techstars Accelerator, right? Like what an amazing group of people that are also going to have a climate impact. So I think although in many ways, our solutions and the things that interest New York State are going to be particular to the challenges we see, I think they're the same challenges people are seeing in major urban areas across the world and in rural areas, because New York State has that whole mix. But we'll see. Right now, I'm really into what's going on in buildings.
Love it, love it. Well, Jackie, just wanted to say thank you for joining us on Rebel One Live. For all those watching online, Jackie Ross Amable, Managing Director of at NextCorps, focused on the climate tech program there. So thanks again, and also kicking off Hispanic Heritage Month and sharing her wisdom and her story with us. So I'm excited we had you today.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I wish I could see all your faces, but it's great to be here. I almost forgot one thing though. Whoever cracks batteries will be a bajillionaire. Let me
That is
just put
true.
that.
That is
So,
true. So share thoughts on that offline. Have one. Take care. Thank you, Jackie. Perfect. So I just ended the live stream. That was great. And Allison said, thank you so much. She just typed in, if anyone has a question, make sure you raise your hand, and we will pick it up. But no, that was great. Glad I appreciate you diving into your story. That was exactly why we do the one-on-ones. We get the realness. And yeah, lots on battery tech. That's a whole nother ball
it's
game.
amazing.
Yeah, yeah. What is um yeah, like that makes me think about Africa. They mentioned a lot of the minerals that go into batteries and them being uh
Well,
Yeah.
Can you imagine this? There's this Atlantic article on this, but like the US military found that like the US electricity grid for some reason is completely cut in half to East Coast, West Coast. And they found that for a very small investment, they could connect the entire grid, make it all clean, get rid of all coal energy and things like that, and save consumers billions of dollars. But the government shut it down.
Well, we just have to figure out what that number is,
I know,
and there may be a business around it.
right?
That's an opportunity. That's interesting. Anyone have a question on the line? Cool. We usually get a lot of questions on the Facebook and whatnot. But Jackie, that was great. Appreciate you, and we'll be posting in the next couple days. But this was great. This was our part of our Hispanic Heritage Month series. So you were, you know, awesome as always. So so thanks again.
Sounds good.
All right.
Bye.
Take care, everyone. Have a good night.